Hello everyone, this is Marlene and Dr. Interian. We are now going to start the Nissl staining procedure. We're going to be following the protocol. So this is what your slides that you would have mounted would look like. You would have mounted your sections in order from rostral to caudal. And so we would allow this to dry for a few days before starting the Nissl staining protocol. So the first step was on the protocol to mount on sub slides. Now, one of the most important things is we're not allowed to let our sections dry between subsequent solution changes that we're going to be doing right now for the Nissl staining. So the first step is to dehydrate and delipidize. So we start this process with 95% alcohol. The protocol says 3 minutes, but given that we are in special circumstances right now, we are truncating this down to a minute. So Marlene, go ahead. Let's start off with the 95% alcohol. We'll just leave the slides in there for about a minute. We're approximating here. And I will go through during the lecture portion and basically explain to you guys why we have to do each one of these steps. But for now, we're just trying to get through the protocol to show you guys what you would have been doing yourselves in class. Okay, so here's your sections. There's your 95% alcohol. Yep, let's move it to the second. And one of the things we try to be careful of is, remember, your sections are mounted on the slides. They're sub-slides, so there's an electrostatic charge that should keep your sections on the slides, but sometimes what happens is you see we have a lot of baths to get through, and sometimes what ends up happening is your tissue starts to fall off of the slides. We're hoping we don't experience that. We typically do on some level, but hopefully not today. Okay, let's move on. So now we're moving it to the 100% alcohol from the 95% alcohol. We're gonna do three 100% alcohols. Yeah. Yeah, it's two, sorry. Two before we move it to the xylene, yes. Okay, let's move it to the second alcohol. Now, after this step, you see we have another 100%, but on the protocol, you see that we have two 15-minute xylene steps. Xylene is a hazardous chemical, so we're going to have to do that in the hood, and we have some xylene set up in the chemical fume hood right here. And Marlene, here comes Marlene. She'll show you how we would have put those slides into the mounts. So Marlene, if you want to explain here.
Yes, so here I'm just using this wire rack holder, and I'll be placing the slides into the holder one at a time.
So you see that holder has some slits into which the slides will fit.
So assuring that the slides don't dry out.
Yep, so that's key. We don't want the sections to dry out, and we'll get a better view of it once the sections are actually in there. There we go.
And assuring that they're completely submerged.
Yep, make sure that all of your sections are actually in the xylene, which they are. Now this says 15 minutes, but again, time, we are not going to do 15 minutes. We are going to cut it down dramatically.
Here's some fresh alcohol.
Yes, so the next step after the 2 15-minute xylene is the rehydration and the staining procedure. So for the rehydration, you see we start with 100% alcohol. So Marlene has brought over that 100% alcohol we have set here over to the hood, so that transferring them from the xylene to the alcohol, we don't get xylene anywhere. Okay, I think we can switch now to the second. Just use the whole thing. Okay, let's remove that.
Okay.
Yeah. It's okay.
Get this one out of the way.
So now we're moving it, submerging the slides into our second xylene bath. Again, for best results, you would follow the protocol to a T. You would do the 15 minutes, but not today. How are you, Marlene?
Doing great.
We are keeping our distance. Oh, Lord. We'll give that another 30 seconds or so, and then we can switch it over into our 100% alcohols for our rehydration and staining. Yep.
Okay. So I've got to make sure they don't dry out. If they dry out, you can definitely see they become cloudy and they look kind of rigid. You want to avoid that.
So we'll take this back to our staining station outside of the hood, and that's our. So we're right here at the 100% alcohol. We'll keep it in there for about a minute and then move them over to the second alcohol bath. Okay. How are our sections doing?
They're doing very well. They're still on the slide, as you can see. They haven't fallen off.
Good.
That's a good sign.
Yeah, and usually they start to curl up along the edges if they're gonna fall off. So it looks like they're still pretty flat on those slides. So next we're gonna do the 2 95% alcohol baths right here. So here you see there's 90, after the 100% alcohol, we had 2 95% alcohol baths prepared.
I'm gonna move it over now. Is that fine?
The staining works really well. This might be a good way to keep the sections from falling off by reducing all the time. But usually when we've gone through the protocol, following the protocol to a T always results in the best staining. But we're doing the best we can.
During tough times.
So now we are moving slides over into the 70% alcohol. And there should be 2 of these. We're right here on the protocol. And again, I'll explain exactly why we're doing the steps that we're doing. It's important to know why you're running a protocol. Running protocols are pretty simple. It's just a matter of making up the solution, but you need to know why you're doing each one of the steps so you can troubleshoot if anything goes wrong. And of course, plan for your future experiments. Okay, so let's get that into the second alcohol, 70% alcohol bath. Followed by 2 50% alcohol baths. And we want to make sure, like Marlene is doing, our slides don't overlap, because then if they do, they get stuck to each other, and then your sections, then pulling the slides apart, your sections will fall off the slides. And it'll damage the sections as well. Okay, let's move it over to the 50%. And how are our sections doing? Let's take a look after when we're switching over to the distilled water. So here we are right now doing the 250% alcohol, and it's next we're gonna do distilled water, and then right after that we're gonna put the sections in the Nissl violet stain.
No, I think
For a minute and a half. And of course, normally you would have the option of doing Nissl violet, theanine, or methylene blue, but we're just doing Nissl violet right now. Okay, let's move it over.
So they look fine.
Yeah, they look good. So let's put it in the distilled water. And let's move that straight over so we can get that in the Nissl violet. So that's what your Nissl violet stain would look like. So this is for a minute and a half, right?
Yeah.
So this is the one where
I'm just assuring that the slides are completely submerged.
now here it says, of course, Nissl violet 2.5 minutes, but like I said, we're only gonna leave it in there for a minute and a half.
We could check on them, just to see what they're.
So that's what they're looking like right now. Okay. Yeah, and then let me bring over, so right after that, we're gonna rinse and differentiate, which is gonna start off with distilled water. Oh, look at that, we're more prepared. Okay, let's move it over to the distilled water, and you'll see a lot of the stain is just gonna come off. And it's okay, that's kind of the point. And then let's move that over and start our 50% alcohol. So again, we're rinsing and we're differentiating. We're doing the 50% alcohol now. And also here on the protocol, we have 2 95s and 2 100s. We're gonna cut that down to just 1. But right now, we're right here, we're at 50. Okay, so there it is in the 50. Let's move on.
Oh wait, I haven't put it in the 50 yet.
Let's move them over into the 50. Looking nice and dark. Okay, let's go ahead and move them into the 70. Right here.
I think this one, the stain is really dark.
Yeah, the stain looks really, really dark. Usually it's a lot lighter than this, but that's okay. Maybe in the xylene, during the clearing, it'll take care of that.
And if not, acetic acid will help.
So typically, the stain should look lighter than this. This looks a little dark, and so when that happens, in the 95% alcohol, which is coming up next, you would add a little bit of acetic acid, which might take care of that, and we can try to do that. We have acetic acid, right? So Marlene, why don't you go ahead and move it
to 95.
Let me add the acetic acid. Of course, in the corrosives. And we could just add a few drops. Again, special circumstances, we would be really careful in terms of how much we were adding, but right now, just close to the, I think that's good. And then let's just give it a shake a little bit.
Ooh, you can see how the stain's kind of.
Yep, now it's starting to come off a little bit. Not evenly on all the sections, but so you guys can see how some of the stain is coming off a little bit. Okay, so now what we'll do is, so let's move it on into the 100%. There we go. Now it's looking more like nice and So let's move it over real quick, get it out of there. Remember, we would do 2, normally we would do 2 95%, but we're just gonna do 1. Here's what's in the 100. Let's leave it in there for just a little bit, and then we're right here. We skipped this 95%. And now we're here, we're skipping 1, we're right here. Next, we're gonna go to clearing, which we'll put in xylene. So let's take our sections over to xylene. In the hood, remember we can't do xylene outside of the hood.
So I'll put it in this one.
Sure.
Since it's okay. Oh, there's.
Right after this step, this is a good sign. Sometimes when you take it from the alcohol to the xylene, if you didn't leave it in the alcohol enough, the xylene would cloud. It's not clouding. This looks really, really good. So the next step is is, yeah, we're gonna skip the second xylene and we're just gonna go straight to cover slipping. We use DPX as the mounting medium. Now the tricky part here, this is really difficult because remember, we are not allowed to let our sections dry. Otherwise the stain will get ruined. So we have our cover slip ready, we have our DPX mountant ready, and so Marlene is gonna cover slip them right now.
Okay. I'll do one at a time.
Okay. The trick is to do this slowly and not to get any air bubbles in there. Marlene demonstrated this to you guys during one of our lab sessions, but right now, again, we're a little bit in a situation where we don't have the luxury of taking our time to do this. But this is a hard setting medium, which means that once it dries, you are not able to remove the cover slip. For our immunostaining, we will be using 40% glycerol, which you can remove the cover slip. So Marlene,
This one has a little too much, but it's good.
it's good.
It's
This is good.
Yeah.
So this is what your stained sections would have looked like. And you can see there are two right here on which got a little too much acetic acid, which means it works, it removes the stain. But the others look really, really good, and I'm glad that happened so that you guys can see in real time. You have to be careful in terms of the concentration and the amounts, but
So,
and then here's the second one. The second one looks great. So the Crescent Violet should look like this light lavender color versus the really dark that you saw before.
so now I'm gonna put a little bit less DPX. Went a little overboard with the other one.
And then once this dries, if it gets on top of your cover slip, you can remove it with a razor blade and clean it with some alcohol before you image. But the goal is to do the cover slipping very nicely, very neatly, and you can see it there, so that you don't have that problem, and make sure there are no air bubbles. This looks really good. There you go. Now we just let these dry, we remove any excess DPX, we clean the slides, and we image. And we'll show you how these look. We'll image these and we'll show you how these look under the scope.
Yeah.
All right, that's it for now for the Nissl staining. Thank you, Marlene.
Bye, guys.
Bye.